Well, I suppose it's this. I mean, going back to the choir and cricket piece I wrote, it was this idea of being part of a team. You know, if you are in a team sport, it is like being in a choir in a way, because obviously, you know, in a cricket team, you're going to have individual performances. So you know, in cricket has individuals in an overall entity of the team. So as I think Ben put it in the piece that I wrote, it's a bit like if you have a solo in a choir, you know, you're like the batsman who's going out to bat, and you might score a century, you know, you might have that, you know, whatever your favorite solo is. And actually one of the other pieces that we had at my father's funeral was the Stanford in G Nunc Dimittis with that wonderful baritone solo at the start.
Yes.
But then, so, you know, you've got your soloist, but you've got to be part of that blended mix of the choir. You know, you can't be too much of an individual. And I always think that Kevin Pietersen, who was one of my heroes and responsible for one of my greatest days at a test match ever in 2005, when, you know, we won the Ashes back from Australia and he scored a ridiculous century and completely destroyed the Aussies. But he famously never quite fitted into that team, that England team. You know, he was always a bit of an outlier in that team. And I always think that if he had been a golfer or a tennis player, we would have appreciated him as the sporting genius he undoubtedly is. But because he was in a team sport, it was much, much harder for him to be appreciated, because he was a disruptor really within the team rather than a team player. And it's, I suppose, you know, every choir has the person who is always a bit too loud, you know.
Yeah, we have to work on that sometimes.
Yes, you know, the dominant soprano that we all
we've
know.
got a couple of them.
Yeah. So I think that is, it's very interesting to hear Aleister Cook talking about his experience as a chorister, because, you know, he didn't come from a particularly musical background. You know, I think his parents loved music, but they weren't, you know, that in that traditional going to church, singing in choirs, loving choral music way. But because he was picked up from his local school choir to then try out for choir schools in London, and then got into the St Paul's choir, and then, as a result of being a chorister, tried out for a music scholarship at Bedford School, and Bedford had a great cricket tradition as well. So he learnt to play cricket as a result, really, of being a chorister. And I mean, that's an extreme example, but he talks about the way that he learnt to deal with pressure, and the discipline of playing top level sport is like the discipline, you know, when you think you're an 8-9-year-old child learning the discipline of psalm singing, and, you know, learning amazing anthems, and traveling as well, and the having to be there on time, and, you know, having to concentrate, that level of concentration taught him a great deal about being a great batsman and occupying the crease, as it were.
36